Hi everybody, this is Dennis Van Kampen, the President and CEO of Denver Rescue Mission, and I'm here with Denver District Attorney John Walsh, and this is a part of our Conversations on a Bench series where during World Homelessness Day, we're meeting with leaders around our community and in our community to talk about the issues of homelessness and to really think about how as a community we can come and we can make a difference in this work. So District Attorney Walsh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We have a beautiful day.
It's John. By the way, Dennis.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Nice to. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know you're really busy, and thank you for taking the time.
Right,
so you've only been on the job for about 9 months?
Yeah, just about. Just a little shy of 9 months.
Yeah. How's it going so far?
Good. It's I was the U.S. attorney, so I was the federal prosecutor for Colorado, and but Denver's my hometown. Moved here when I was 12, and it's a particular honor to be working in the city of Denver on all the different public safety issues we're facing in a time where I really feel like the city is transitioning out of a rough patch with the pandemic and the post-pandemic years, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes people can sort of sit back and make judgments about politicians or elected officials and without really understanding the pressure and the responsibility that comes along with that job. So in your job, in the 9 months or so that you've been in, what has been a high point for you?
I have to say that one of the things that has been most gratifying about this job as a district attorney, where you're dealing with the day-to-day challenges the city faces, is the level of interaction you have with the community. And that means individual people who have issues that they want to raise, and also community organizations and groups that are providing services, much like you all do. And that level of kind of really deep connection to the city. It's I guess
whatever you said, like someone was
I know,
happy.
there we are. But but that level of connection to the community is really meaningful. Yeah.
And I know in sort of reading through your bio and following your career, equity and justice has been really important to you, and you've done a lot of work in that space. And in my opinion, I think you've made our world better and our country better. So when you think about equity and justice, how does that impact? Maybe a twofold question. One is how does it impact your work here in Denver? And then number two, as we think about homelessness, how does it impact that?
Well, those are pretty profound questions, right? And especially when you're working in the criminal justice system. And one of the things that I tell every new deputy district attorney, every new employee is, I just remind them that their job is to do the right thing. We're, as prosecutors, we're lawyers, but we don't have a client in the traditional sense that, I represent this business or this individual who's been harmed. We really represent the whole community. And what that means is we have both the privilege and the obligation to look out for that greater concept of justice and to show up every day willing and able to take the heat to do the right thing in every case and to do it the right way. And that's an incredibly empowering thing for young lawyers, and any lawyer for that matter, certainly for me. But it does impose a lot of additional thought about what that actually looks like. So to go to the second part of your question about homelessness, where we see folks who are unhoused in our cases is when they have committed some criminal offense. And the question is both, how do we hold them properly accountable and to what degree, depending on circumstances? And also, are we thinking about the underlying causes that led them to that place, that led them to be unhoused, led them to whatever criminal action they took? And there's an enormous array of possible situations. I mean, all the way up to absolute horrific murders and things like that, where we address it as we would any murder. But oftentimes for people who are unhoused, even the offenses that actually make it into the criminal justice system are pretty low level. And, we can cycle people through the system, or we can address the underlying cause or try to address the underlying causes to prevent crime by getting them out of that situation.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, and even some of the rhetoric that we're hearing in our country now, some of it I think seeks to villainize people that are unhoused, and to lump everyone together. And there's been language around threats and destroying our cities and things like that. And in my work, what I've often tried to share with the community is maybe to put a face on it, and to say, okay, if this person who is unhoused commits, to your point, a really serious crime, an assault or a rape or a murder, they, like everyone else, need to be held accountable to the full extent of the law. But some other things, some other issues that are technically crime, why are they doing that? What would it be like if you didn't have a house to go to? I can remember at certain times in my career, I would have staff meetings with our homeless shelter staff. And when it was winter, I'd pick the coldest day, and we would have the staff meeting outside. And we'd be outside for an hour and a half, and the staff would be complaining and they'd be shivering. And I'd say, okay, listen, we've been out here for 90 minutes and we're going back to a warm office, a warm car, or your warm home. What if you had nowhere to go? What would that cause you to do to get what you need? Food, clothing, warmth. And I think when we reframe things that way, that then all of a sudden we're humanizing it, never taking away from the fact that people should always be held accountable. But I love what you're saying about the underlying cause. One of my mentors once said that he had never yet met anyone that was unhoused that wanted to be unhoused, right? Even if you see them on the street and say, hey, go to Denver Rescue Mission, and they say, no way, I like it out here. No, they don't. But that's their mechanism, that's their response. They don't want the situation they have.
It's interesting. One of to go to your point about those lower level offenses, one of the things that can happen with people who are in the situations you're describing is that they can sort of repeatedly commit the same crime. And they're low-level crimes, so the amount of effective consequence that we can impose on the criminal in the criminal justice system is pretty limited. Which we need to do. We need to, people get very frustrated in the community when they see folks who are repeat offenders just sort of cycling in and out of the system. And the reality is that at some point we have to actually work with those folks to get them housing, also get them whatever mental health or substance use disorder treatment they need. And at the same time, there may come a moment in which someone like that, the best way for them to get that help, for example, on substance use disorder, is in a jail or criminal facility. And I'm proud to be working with the mayor and the county court here to try to develop a program that actually will work to get folks the help they need if they're unable to get to that help in the community.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, so I've been in this space for about 14 years, 2 years here in Denver, almost 2 years. And at my previous location, there was a well-known guest who would come in for shelter, and he would come in the day center for services, and really nice guy. But he would come in frequently, and he'd try housing and it didn't work, and he'd try housing and it didn't work. And one day I came across an incident report, and he was coming into our building, and when the security stopped and needed to search his bag, something snapped, and he punched our staff right in the face, and it was a significant punch. And then he kicked the door, broke the glass on the way out, and he ran. And he stayed there for a while yelling, and eventually he ran. And my staff didn't call the police. And I went down to the staff and I said, why didn't you call the police? And they're like, oh, well, that's Bob, and we all know Bob, and he might have just been having a bad day. Well, here's the rest of the story. When he left us, he ran 2 blocks away to a gas station. And there was a pregnant woman pumping gas, and without any provocation, he assaulted her. And thankfully she wasn't seriously injured, but it was an assault. And the police got there and they took him into custody, of course, right? Well, here's the thing. He had been off his meds for 2 weeks. And by taking him into custody, he was able to get the help that he needed to get back on his meds. And my staff were trying to do what they thought was compassionate and not call the police. And what I said to them is, this is a teachable moment, that sometimes compassion is accountability. Sometimes compassion is calling the police, because there was harm done. and he got help. He got back on his meds, and he was fine after that.
Well, I think that's such a great and important story, because it's easy for us when we look at an individual case to sort of put it into a particular box and think that there's only one solution to things. And there are times when people are so dysregulated, to use a phrase, that they need structure imposed, right? And they also, and I think this is a really important point, there are times when someone is in that kind of situation and they are creating all these collateral damage, all this potential harm to other folks. And part of what we do in the DA's office or the police department, and I'm sure your folks have to wrestle with this all the time, is, do you have somebody who is really going to pose a risk to others? And then you have to deal with it appropriately. But why they're posing that risk is something that we need to think about as well. And we take steps to make sure people are safe and the community is safe. At the same time, we need to be thinking about, how do we deal with this problem long time, over a longer horizon. And because until we deal with that, that's the person who's going to be coming in and out of the system, and we won't have solved the problem.
Right, exactly. Well, and sometimes it's not even the person that poses a danger to others. Sometimes they're a danger to themselves. Right?
Absolutely.
And the illustration I use is, okay, let's fast forward a few months here in Colorado, and now it's one of those nights that we're near zero, the wind chill is below zero, and we have an individual in a park or in a business doorway who doesn't have a winter coat, he doesn't have a blanket, he's obviously suffering from mental illness, and he may not survive that night. And then help comes, whether it's in the form of law enforcement or an outreach agency, and he says, no, I'm fine, I'm going to stay here. Well, we know that he's not fine. We know that he is at risk of dying, and we know that, for lack of a better term, somebody with healthy mental faculties would make a very different decision. So then again, the most compassionate thing may be against that person's will to be able to take them into a place that is safer, and sometimes that actually might be the criminal justice system, not long term, but for that night. And I know that's not the wisest use of the criminal justice system. But we also have a responsibility for that person who cannot make a choice for themselves and may not survive the choices they are making.
Well, and so two thoughts on that exact issue. Oftentimes in the criminal justice system, I know the police feel this way, our team does too, we often feel like the criminal justice system is almost the ultimate safety net in some circumstances, which is not how it should be. We should have ways to address these issues with folks before they get to the point of the criminal justice system. But it's our responsibility when they do commit a crime to hold them accountable and deal with the issues that may be coming up. The second point that I would just make is that if we don't have systems in place that help people get off of that trajectory, they're much more likely to end up in the criminal justice system eventually, and hopefully without having harmed anybody else. And so we need to think holistically about, I think you mentioned to me earlier that the question of homeless folks and the unhoused is something that is solvable. This is not it. It's not a problem that we have to just accept. And part of that attitude is that we look at each individual and say, how do we make sure this person never has to end up in the criminal justice system? And that's a tough thing, but it's what a community as a whole should be doing if we're really going to make progress.
I think you're right, and I'm often asked, since I'm new, I've only been here almost 2 years, and I'm often asked, what do I think about the city of Denver, the mayor's response to homelessness? What do I think about these things? And one of the things that I often point to is most cities around the country do not have a government system, particularly a local government system, that is actively trying to do something to make the problem better. And I think it's actually a blessing to be here in Denver, where we have a mayor, a city government, law enforcement, who actually are taking concrete steps and putting resources toward trying to help people. Now, we can all Monday morning quarterback and say that was the wrong thing, or that was the wrong way to do that, and those are fair discussions to have.
Right.
But at least we have that starting point of our city wants to make a difference, wants to do the right thing. And I know for us at Denver Rescue Mission, you've talked a lot about how do we get people those services before they get into the criminal justice system. And that's why we're here, right? To help meet people at their point of need, and to walk forward with them, not just so they don't get into the criminal justice system, but to your point, so they get the care that they need, medical, health, job skills, whatever it might be, and then they leave homelessness and don't return to it. So, and I would say one of the things that we're really grateful for is we have a strong and positive relationship with the city, from the mayor and host and law enforcement, criminal justice. Denver Police Department works with us like a hand in a glove. And I don't think that we could do our work as well as I think we do it if it wasn't for those relationships that we have with the city. So I'm really grateful for that.
Well, look, I know the mayor is committed. He's made it his top priority over years now to try to address this issue. And that's really a reflection of the fact that the pandemic kind of knocked us flat for a while, right? And when you came downtown, we had these very large encampments, and that wasn't good for the people in the encampments, and it sure wasn't good for downtown, and for the businesses around that or the residents of that area. And I thought the mayor, by aggressively seeking to get those folks into housing was doing the right thing. Now, as you say, you can second guess and Monday morning quarterback a lot of stuff, or maybe it's Tuesday morning these days. But the reality is it did make a difference downtown, and I think it helped a lot of people along the way. I'll flag two areas though that I think we should also be thinking about, because I have to say that we see frequently people who are we got to wait till the top of the hour.
I think
and then
we
it's
do.
really spectacular, but it's like first of all, we do not do enough when people have been incarcerated, especially in the prisons. I'm not even talking about the jails right now, but people have been incarcerated for longer periods. When they come out, they get very little support unless they happen to come across a particular program. There are a couple of good ones, the Denver Dream Center, the Second Chance Center, things like that. That is an entry point to homelessness. That creates a circumstance where more criminal conduct can happen. And so one area that I do think that would be a wise expenditure of resources is that we do more at that point to get people back on their feet. And that doesn't mean handing out money necessarily or anything, but it means giving them structure and and more than $25 and a bus ticket to Denver, which is sometimes what actually happens, or $100. So that's point number one. And I think that's something that if we really, that's a crime prevention program in a big way. And it's also a homelessness prevention program, and something that we should be doing. The second thing that is tragically another entry point into homelessness, and you know so much more about this, but from the criminal justice system point of view, I worry about this. You have kids who have been in foster homes who age out. And they may get essentially no help. They're 18, they're depending on their foster family, they may literally be without a place to stay. And again, that leads to terrible things for that kid.
It does.
To terrible things for the community, and those kids end up in the criminal justice system. And that's another clear place where if we intervened, we could prevent crime and keep the community safe.
Absolutely. One of the fastest growing demographics nationally in homelessness are those youth that you're talking about. And as soon as they turn 18, the money stops, so their families kick them out. They do not have the life skills. I have 4 kids, and at 18, none of my kids knew what the world was really like, But they had a support system. These kids don't have a support system. They end up on the streets. Those are the ones that are being trafficked. They're being assaulted. And to your point, all they can think about is a survival mode, and survival mode is oftentimes leads to entry into the criminal justice system. So I couldn't agree with you more. You alluded earlier to a conversation that you and I had off camera about my belief that this is a solvable problem, and homelessness is solvable. And I believe that we have every resource we need in the country to solve this problem. I think the one thing that we're lacking is the communal will for nonprofits, ministries, churches, businesses, government, private philanthropy, the entire community to come together and say, this is a problem we can solve. So maybe let's not focus on our divisions or focus on labeling and stereotyping or on dangerous rhetoric. Let's come together and do something as a community. So given that, I know our time's running away. So what are some ways you could see our community coming together in a broad sense, and maybe even narrow that down? Some tangible things that we could do as a community that would help move the needle.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I think the reality is there's not a single thing that would fix everything. Right. It's to deal with this issue, and I know you understand this better than anybody. It's a whole bunch of different measures that collectively are going to deal with the issue. I would just go back to a few things. One, everything we can do to make housing more affordable, especially at the least expensive level, will be the tide that lifts all boats. So as a starting place. So that's going to help there as well. But on the criminal justice side, I do think that we need to acknowledge that there are some folks who are wrestling in the throes of mental illness or substance use disorder that may need the structure of a I don't know if you want to call it in custody, in jail or prison, that would be that way, but other programs that give them the structure to give them the opportunity to get better. And the mayor, with this new recovery court concept, is moving in that direction. I'm a strong supporter of that.
Good.
The second additional thing that I would say, very concrete, is support both by the government and by nonprofits and DA's offices for really robust re-entry programs for people coming out of incarceration, because that is a community that is at risk of both being unhoused and of committing additional crimes. And if we can intervene at that point, it make a huge difference. And then to go back to something I said a moment ago, the more we can do to help foster kids who've been in the foster care system, to give them the support they need to get on their feet, rather than just literally cutting them loose.
That's right.
That's gonna, when you think of someone who's 18, and that's how they're starting their very young adult life, the likelihood of them never getting back on their feet for decades is high, and that's money well spent if we could get them on their feet.
I mean, the last statistic I saw from Denver Rescue Mission is about 49%. This is just a known statistic. I'm sure it's higher. 49% of the middle-aged and older adults that we serve first experience homelessness as a child or a youth. They didn't stay homeless the entire life, most of them. But that started a cycle, and that cycle was hard to get out of. And I really love what you're talking about. Let's get upstream. Let's do something to help these people before they become homeless, before they enter the criminal justice system, or if they're coming out of jail or prison, then to make sure they never enter it again. And housing is a huge part of that. I'd love to talk a lot more, but I keep getting the signals that we're done. But
can I just leave you with one thought? And this is central to the mission of a district attorney's office and our mission, and that is our job ultimately is community safety, and that means community safety for everyone, and that includes people who are unhoused, and we need to be sure that we are protecting them because they're victims of crime all too often themselves. But we also do need to take into account that, as you said at the beginning of this conversation, if someone has committed a crime, they need to be held accountable. And we need to do that in a smart and an effective way to get them out of that cycle of criminal behavior if we possibly can. But we also do need to think about what's the whole community look like at the end of the day.
Exactly, because we want to build a safe community for everyone, safe and well. So the business owner shouldn't have to fight people laying in front of his doorway to open his business. But the people laying in the doorway, we need to help to make sure they don't have to lay in the doorway.
Right.
So
right. And that they don't even feel that they need to. So,
exactly. Yeah. So District Attorney John Walsh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Really a pleasure.
Really
to meet
grateful
you, Dennis.
for all you do.
So appreciate it.
Thank you.